Hey guys, who wants to play a game of hot banana? Don't know how to play? Well, here's how you play. You take a banana, you set it on fire, boom, you win. Then you get it that time, let me show you again. Take banana, set it on fire, done, simple as, how's it fun? Play it with up to 50 of your friends and family, but a billion time, who cares, right? As long as you got a hot banana, watch me again. That wasn't a banana, that was my neighbor's cat. I'm going to jail.
Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Hot Bananas. That was just a little bit of a random share of what was found on the internet, the crazy things that you find relevant to this theme. So we are talking about games and play and why creatives should do more of it and regularly. It's part of a healthy creative diet. Today we will be joined by three fantastic guests. And I'll introduce them shortly. But a recap of the game or the mechanics of what happens in the next hour. Each of them will talk about a social object to just kickstart a story about games and play. And we'll give time for all three of them to have conversations once they've kind of shown what their social object is. And then we'll put it to the test of what happens in the blender, the creative blender with their three ideas and stories. So these three people, players, our multiplayers will be Ben, Amy, and Ash or Ashley. Amy has been here before. So this is her kind of second go at it, our fantastic guests. And so yes, welcome to Hot Bananas episode 11, and over to you, Amy. Oh, sorry, over to you, Ben. The host has forgotten the order, so Ben, over to you. A little bit of a
games with us already, aren't you?
That's the best game ever.
Help yourself. And over to Ash. So we were asked to bring a thing, and I brought a thing, and it's a piece of paper. Because a piece of paper you can play with in many different ways. It's a paper aeroplane, origami. This actual piece of paper has a picture on it of a person, so you can play with the puppet of the picture. You could screw it into a ball. You can like chuck it about, or you can use it with a pen to make countless other games. But there's another way, because there's a game I was taught when I was young, in which this piece of paper represents a point in a point system for this overarching game that I was told to play. And many people play this game. They take it very seriously, and some dedicate their whole lives to it. Because in this game, the more pieces of paper you have, the more you are worth. Right? So when it was first invented, it was a tool to serve other humans for trading. Like you can't really swap a dentist appointment for a shoe. It gets a bit like fiddly. So they invented this sort of thing to help solve that. But today it's one of the few belief systems the whole world agrees upon. And this game has become so popular that many of us humans who play it have become its tool. And the game has been characterized in a board game called the Game of Life, where the winner is the one who gets the most money and status symbols by the time they reach the end. The end, I assume, being death. So the measure of a person's success is rated by their finance in this game, which is displayed through status symbols. If someone is doing well, it's not because of their health, it's because of their shiny new car. And other contributing factors are job titles, heterosexual relationship status, and awards that recognize achievement within their chosen field of work. But mostly it's about this. So the game has developed such a strong following, it's weaved a new meaning into our language. So when we hear words like success, worth, wealth, thrive, security, survive, these have all become meanings associated to this point system in this game. And we join in the praise of those who do well. It is good. They are good, especially when they provide opportunity for poorer people. Aren't they good? Of course they are. They must be, right? Because we're surrounded by stories that tell us they must be. The game tells a story of how they have worked hard to achieve their high score. However, the basis of the game is that points make more points. And often these points are distributed among family or friends to ensure they are doing well in the game. And many of the points were scored through acts outlawed later in the game. So as the game developed, they had to change the rules a bit because some people were playing it in a bit of a shitty way. Slavery was a very popular way of getting ahead. And when this was excluded from play, the players who gathered the most slaves were sufficiently rewarded. So that's good, isn't it? And whatever the source of these successful players, the game demands we recognize their ranking with trust and respect. The rules of this game are supported by a system made up of lawyers, courts, councils, and police that ensure the safety of these points gathered by reputable players, such as Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew. The game relies on these winners to exemplify their lead, as it is their success that keeps people believing in the game. And the aim of the game is taught through various mediums and traditions. Points may be awarded as gifts on birthdays. For example, I would receive £5 each year from my Aunt Mabel, who I never met. And this was taught to me as kind. But the aunt who visited me never received such praise. Even though I knew her much better, she was never described as kind. It was the one who sent me the money. There's computer games, they perpetuate the story. Has anyone checked in on their saved Super Mario game to see how he's doing now? Because you were rampantly collecting all those coins for him, weren't you? I don't know what that was saying in the game. There wasn't any, he didn't have to spend those coins on anything. It didn't help him rescue the princess in the end or get rid of Bowser. So there has to be something more forceful. So there is this thing called what I call auto debt, applied to ensure that we all must play this game. Land bought, conquered, or stolen may now be used to collect points by those who stay on it. With 96% of land sold out, the system of owning and renting ensures the high scores remain high. And the low scorers may climb the ranks by working for businesses run by high scorers. And high scoring business models maintain their ranking by getting more points than they give. This has led to cunning tactics. It's called profit. David Graeber, I learned something the other day. He said JP Morgan recently gained 85% of their annual profits of this stuff through fees and penalties alone. That's JP Morgan, 85% of their profits through fees and penalties alone. So players may create games within the game, introducing and changing the rules that penalize the players that play their game, right? James Cast writes about the finite and infinite games. And the difference between an infinite game and a finite game is that an infinite game is played for the sake of play. And a finite game has a clear defined winner. So a finite game could be a debate or a game of chess where there's a winner, and an infinite game could be a conversation like what we're having now. We're not trying to argue a point, we're just talking and progressing conversation. So there's no clear winner. Or throwing a frisbee about, that's an infinite game. It's just for the fun of it. So the game of life, so there may be infinite games within, so there may be finite games within an infinite game, but not infinite games within a finite one, if you know what I mean. The game of life board game is a finite game with a winner at the end. The game we are taught is an infinite game. We play it apparently for the joy of playing it. The joy may be interpreted by means of comparison to other players, and we don't see their score. So I have no idea what Rena, Amy, and Ash are earning. but I can try and judge them now. Look, Amy's got a sort of map behind it, sort of suggests that she's traveled around quite a lot. I could take from that she might be quite well. I think Ash looks like the poorest. Sorry, mate. I don't know these people, by the way. I'm really just demonstrating ugly prejudice.
I'm in my east wing, by the way, just so you know. I take to my west wing if you
want.
I
see. You'll get your car back to the center point eventually. So the joy is interpreted by comparison to others. We can judge their ranking through earned status symbols. These are displayed as aspirational rewards on billboards and in magazines. So it's very important we keep up with what's going on in there. The top players are made known to us all, and currently at the top of the leaderboard is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who's an online all-in-one delivery service that became a monopoly during the pandemic. And the increased delivery cost was a tactic employed at this point, very clever indeed. Losers of the game are also kept on display. Housing the homeless was not a problem when it came to potentially endangering the health of the high scorers with the pandemic, but swiftly putting them back out in their place helps continue the story of the game. If you look at humanity, it's the top causes of death for humans may be cured by their own incredible inventions. We've got a cure for cancer, but the game keeps these cures at a rate that only the top winners can afford. Right, so there's a good reason to do well in this game. So what does this game teach us? It says win points by getting as many as possible and losing as few as possible. Get points, feel good. Do this by working hard. Lose points, feel bad. Do this by not being stupid. I'm saying what the story we're told is. Winner, hard worker. Loser equals stupid. Charge more, pay less. Compete and compare yourselves to others to determine how well you are doing. Judge achievements by what is displayed in the latest magazine. Look up to those who rank highly. Look down to those who do not. Try to get as many points from other players by hooking them in to play a finite game in which you can create and change the rules to penalize them and win more points. The final lesson is win or die. That's my little rant about this piece of paper and the game.
Oh God. Thanks, man. Well, that was a surprise. I'm loving it already. I'll park my thoughts on it. Not with a note writing here, but let's pass the tenor, pass the buck to Amy then, so to speak.
Sure. Hello. Yeah, I found this quite tricky to pick an object because I work in games and I have since about 2013. My relationship with my partner is almost entirely based on playful experiments, like sending them to the other end of the city, locking boxes, messing with their mind. And I'm a board gamer and a LARPer, but I did have a think, and I realized one object that stuck out for me was a book written by somebody called Tikani, which I have on my shelf, which does have a game element, which I will explain. I did creative writing at uni a million years ago, and I never wrote a book, but she did. It's a book of short stories about growing up in a fishing village somewhere very, very cold, which is called Sermasuak. Sermasuak is a little bit like the Arctic. It's a very freezing place. Its history is based on a lady called Sermasuak, who was a hunter, who was very, very strong and had a lot of adventures, and eventually had this land named after her. And Anouk grew up listening to her grandmother's stories, who told her tales of Sermasuak and all of her adventures and the things that she did and the places that she went, and ultimately how she ended up having this entire sort of nation named after her. And Anouk grew up and got on with her own things and eventually wrote this book of short stories. This is all inside a LARP, a festival LARP called Empire, which is a couple of thousand people who 4 times a year go and camp in a field in the middle of nowhere in costume and are part of a world for a couple of days. It's quite epic. There's a lot of nations, there's a lot of politics. All of them have different histories, stories, chips on their shoulders, prejudices as well. They have different goals, and they have, enemies of the nation that they have, different nations, enemies of the empire that they have to go and battle with. So it's one of these big epic fantasy LARPs. And I think the reason this book kind of interested me is because this is so much a part of that game. It's such a massive thing that it has some astonishingly tiny elements that become part of it. I'll try and explain what I mean. The first time I went to this LARP, I kind of assumed that it would be a little bit like one of the ones you do when you put on a tin hat and go to the top of a pub and imagine everything. Like there's definitely traffic outside, but you're here to negotiate something fantastical, and you've got to make it all up in your own mind. But when you go to one of these very, very large events, it's a lot more immersive, I discovered, which was a massive shock. I mean, for the first thing, almost everyone has spent an enormous amount of time either buying or sometimes making their costumes and learning how to work with leather or metal and actually make these things in very traditional ways. There's street lighting, there are wooden structures that go up, taverns, throne rooms, all kinds of things, fighting pits for the orcs. There's, storytelling arenas in the woods, all kinds of things that just sort of blow your mind. And the most interesting thing about it is that the game just isn't there. There are non-player characters, there are crew. They've created this world. They've created an enormous amount of lore and ritual and gods and problems and enemies. But like, for example, with Samsuak, the nation that I joined and costumed myself for and gave myself a backstory for, the whole legend of Samsuak, the lady who this land that I come from is named after, is one line. She was super strong. She hunted. They named the land after her. And that makes LARP in a really interesting way, kind of a blank sheet, because if you want there to be more than that, which you would expect there to be, you're a person, you come from here, there would be stories that were told to you. That's entirely up to you. If you want that to exist, if you want to talk about that, tell those stories, you go write them, because no one's going to do that for you. There's an enormous number of gaps that are left within live action role play games, which are up to you to fill. And if you don't, then the game is fun anyway. But if you do, everything you do makes the game better. And I think that makes something that it makes it a game in a way that a lot of other games I've played aren't, because you always have agency in a game, but you don't get to build it collectively in the same way. You play it, but you don't create it. And when you show up to a LARP, you can kind of decide, if not the major events that are going to happen to the Queen, you can decide on minor things that are going to happen to your character, who they're going to be, what they're going to do, and what the world is. Just out of interest, this is something that I've written. There's actually an entire library there. I know one person who's writing a dictionary and has been for the last 3 years. So people get very, very invested in being creative in this space and finding those empty spaces inside the LARP and just starting to fill them with creative things that they find interesting or think ought to exist. So that's a game that I thought was something a little bit different, because then you have the ability to be creative in a way that you're good at, that you find interesting, that you're passionate about, and take that in there. For example, if you are a very underconfident singer, which I am, my partner's a little bit more confident, but we both found that we can go there and we can just make up some comedy songs, do a terrible job on the ukulele, and just turn up at different people's campsites and start having a go. Because if you are making the effort to be a part of the world, you make the world better, even if you can't sing. So it's an amazing chance to just try something with almost no consequences, as long as you are trying to build on the empty spaces in that world. You're not talking about cars or taxes or your life outside of it. If you're making the effort to be part of it, you can't help but bring other people up and make their game better, make their world better. And it's a great opportunity to try out things that you're a little bit scared of, try out public speaking. If you're somebody who's never going to do that, you can stand in front of 100 people and swear at them until they go out and fight for you. Or you can try out careers that you've never tried. I know people who are surgeons on the field doing medical stuff and getting to actually try out being something that they may never be or never do. And just not that it necessarily means they go home and decide on a career change, but they get to find out what that would feel like just for a moment. So, I mean, I guess wrapping up on that, it's I think LARP is an incredibly lovely way of turning things into game that you wouldn't expect to be game. And I still quite like the idea of Amy writing a book of stories one day, but being set a bunch of parameters within the LARP world and an imperative made that fun and possible in a way that it really isn't for me. And so, you know, wielding a scalpel or running around with a sword traditionally, or writing or singing becomes game. I think there's something interesting to chat about there. So that's what I was bringing along, is not my book of stories.
Thanks, Amy. It's a good tandem from like a different piece, a different piece of paper game. So we'll kind of again save that. I got lots of ideas happening here. And okay, Ash, your turn, please.
Hi guys, thanks for having me, Rena. I've been really looking forward to this actually, and as soon as you kind of announced the title, it's kind of got me thinking, and hearing what Ben and Amy have had to say as well is kind of almost semi-crafted what I wanted to say. And before I kind of bring out my object, I thought I'd give a bit of a backstory that because when you talked about gaming, I was like, okay, fine, this is quite interesting to me, because I used to be a digital creative director at BBC, and so it was all about digital, and digital's always been my life really. Throughout my career, I'm just obsessed with everything digital. So I was kind of thinking around that kind of world, and now I'm a lecturer. I try and talk about it to my students, and I've been thinking about it for a while. And the first time I heard gamification in like the digital sense was I was able to look back. So I went to a conference, and it's in 2011 at South by Southwest, and there's a guy called I wrote down his name, Seth Priach, who used to be a developer at Google, and he did this fantastic thing. He had a huge hall of people, must have been 3,000 people in there, and it's the first time gamification came up as a term, and he organized the whole room in something like 30 seconds by turning it into a game. And we were discussing what a game exists as, and we're like, because this is what Ben was talking about, money, and I can't wait to talk to him about it, but there are rules and you choose to follow those rules, and you need to have an end point and a beginning point. And he was saying that you can solve anything with a game, and it just starts thinking. He was kind of displaying these brilliant things online and whatever, and it's like, why stop with organizing a room? Why don't you start thinking about curing cancer or kind of curing climate or whatever else you can do? But turning things into a game is a really interesting thing of doing it. And people hadn't really considered that in the digital sense, that in 2011, Facebook was kind of taking off. It wasn't as big as it was. I don't think Twitter even existed. Instagram definitely wasn't there. But to take it a step further, that like games have always been around us. Like these things are popping up more and more because this digital world is it's so easy to apply these things. You now have like these coffee cards, you know, get 5 stamps, get your 6th one free, that's coffee. Your free coffee, that's a game. They're trapping you into these kind of things. You look at Amazon, you look at these points you try and get, all these different things. It just makes me think. And just to kind of to link it back into the objects I want to talk about is, well, one of my favorite heroes being a digital is Charlie Brooker. So Charlie Brooker, those who don't know, created Black Mirror, but before that he was actually a computer games editor. So he's a writer, and he wrote all about computer games, and he's always obsessed, just as how I am, I think, about computer games. And he's talking a lot about computer games and where they come from and whatnot. But and those whoever has watched Black Mirror, every episode is based around a computer game. There's always some kind of game element to it, and it's a brilliant way of kind of thinking it. That I don't want to ruin anything for you, but it never really ends out happy, but it's a great way to kind of look at things. That it's just a really kind of, it's a dark look on the world, but it's a computer game. There's some kind of game element to it. And so they asked Charlie Brooker, what's your favorite game? Seeing as he's a computer games writer, he is fully involved in it. And the object that I want to bring along is his answer, which was, I might do a screen. Can I do a screen share? Does that work on here?
Yes.
But, oh God, I got open. I got open some preferences, but it's Twitter. That to me, Twitter that was his answer. And I think that's such a kind of, it's a nice answer to bring along, that social media networks and Twitter and how social networks exist. And very similar to what Ben was saying about money, I think that there are definite rules to this, that you exist. And maybe that's not money, but you have your likes and you have your levels where you have these blue ticks. And you have all this currency that goes through, that you post something up there and you can, you get social currency. People reply to you and they like it and they tweet it. You can be a winner or a loser, depending on what kind of person you are on it and whatnot. And you exist as this. And social media exists as this kind of crazy ass game, which people kind of plug into. You get these dopamine levels and you get these kind of highs and lows, and people kind of happy for it. And I just thought it's a really interesting way to look at life, and especially the digital world, which so many of us exist in, that you are playing a game. You don't realize it, but they're trapping you in here, that every time you post something in there, you're contributing to this game. And it made me think even more, right? So it exists as a game, this kind of social media network, and you choose if you want to participate big time or small time, whether you're on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever you're like TikTok. But they exist as a social currency, and you call it a social media platform. And I was like, okay, that's quite cool. But the biggest game at the moment, computer game people are playing, is Fortnite. And Fortnite to me is kind of totally flipped on the head what Charlie Brooker is saying about Twitter, in so much as, yes, it's a computer game, but Fortnite exists solely as a social network, that you go to concerts on it, you interact with people. I don't know if you guys play Fortnite, or there's other kind of, they got a particular term, which is, it's escaped my mind, but it's kind of this people coming together to play computer games online at the same time. That's a social media network and exists underneath a games platform. I just think it's a really interesting way when you start looking at these things, that games have become social media networks. And that's what I wouldn't mind kind of talking with you guys about, is how this world's totally changed on its head, that the games platform is secondary to social media, which I think is quite, they recognize the power of this stuff. And it's not like just existing as things that you come in and shoot. For those who play, you come in, you chat to your friends, you kind of meet up and you go and do kind of things, you do tasks. But the main point of this is to talk about it. And Reed Hastings, I don't know if you know that name, but he's a CEO of Netflix. He runs Netflix, and the thing that he's most worried about is Fortnite. He comes out and says, most thing I'm worried about. He also said sleep, that he thinks the biggest competitor to Netflix is sleep and Fortnite. But you can kind of see why. Like, TV has become so passive. It's become so kind of like there's a timeline. You can't interact with it. It just exists. For someone who used to work at the BBC, that it's very kind of like sit back and relax. Whereas you kind of see what their competitors are, like these Fortnite kind of games where people are playing, where you become the star. They've just released a new update where you're kind of the lead actor in this thing and you're kind of going through it. There's a game element to it, but you add on the package of social media networks, and you're just like, this is such an impressive product. And then just taking it one step further, that we're here chatting on this is my kind of wrap up, I guess, but we're here chatting on Zoom. You're watching us on Zoom potentially, you're listening to us, but we exist as this person. I'm here, you're watching me as a film, as a video, and I see these three people in front of me and they all exist as a film. But it's like, why? Why can we not exist as an avatar? When you react to something, you may smile, you may laugh, but I don't know if you kind of find this, Rena, as well when you teach, but so you get what we call camera resistance. People don't want to come on, they don't want to talk to us. You can understand why, because there could be a big group of people. But you start imagining if we existed as a social network within talking environments like this, you could exist as an avatar, you could gamify it, we could have polls, we could have likes, we could have comments, we could have lots of other things. And you start thinking that all these gamification things exist. We have money, we have these LARP activities over here. You exist as an avatar, you choose the rules you exist in. But how long until like something like Teams or Zooms really embraces it? And why do we kind of exist in this kind of format when we can start, you see people buy clothes for yourselves and you want to exist as an avatar, you want to kind of join in these things. I just think we're at a real tipping point for gaming, that these kind of elements exist. No one's really kind of combined it or thought about it or how we can do it. And that's what I'm most curious to kind of see, is how we exist in 2D, but in this 3D world, you look at something like Mandalorian. I don't know if you know, but that was filmed within a games platform. So Fortnite and Mandalorian exist in the same world. It's built on the same platform and they go in and out of it, that all you have is an actor in the middle and then everything around it's built. So how long until we kind of embrace that? And it just feels it's quite an exciting point. So my chosen thing is Twitter and social media networks, but I think social media networks is so much bigger. So that's my chosen point. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ash. Okay. Right. Back to the three of you. And so let loose with the thoughts and whatever virtually was happening in your brains. So yeah, have a conversation.
Can I do, just because I was on Spotlight Web, the last thing which Ben said was win or die with money, and that suddenly filled me with dread. It's kind of like, it's such a scary thought of how, because at the raw, I totally agree with you, like how money, you can gamify how we receive money, right? But then you either win or you die. But like, what rules do you apply to if you don't have money? You die. It's scary. I just wonder if you want to talk about that more, because that's daunting.
Well, there's the truth of it, which is, yeah, if you get a disease that can be cured, but it costs too much money for you to be able to afford it, there's that. But there's also the story, which a lot of us believe in, which isn't true. And that is, if you run out of money, you die. That is, you need money to survive. And that's not true. You don't eat it. You don't need it. It's just a transactional thing. In fact, there's a lot more freedom and creativity. Universal wage has worked really well. When you take away this threat, this every month you have to pay X, once you take that away, you have this freedom. You know that, and you're both creative people. You know that when you sorry, all three of you creative people, sorry, Irina is at the top there. You know that the zone that you're in when that amazing idea comes is not a high pressure one at all. It's the freedom, it's the ability to let go of any of that pressure. So yeah, it's win or die is the story that we're told.
When you were talking, it's kind of it's things which you do think about, but you choose not to think about it because it's quite a dark thought, I think. But how the status symbols you give yourself comes from money, but it doesn't mean the quality of life, right? That buying the nice fast car, you're still going to get there in your crappy old car, but it's a status symbol, isn't it? And it doesn't mean you have a better life, but the rules which you judge, or your friends or your people you care about judge you on, is suddenly changing.
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot easier to judge a rich person than it is anyone else. You can probably guarantee when you see someone wearing the Gucci shirt and they've got the smell and you're kind of like, you're obviously relying on that, aren't you? It's covering something up. I really enjoy the question, what's more dangerous, a poor person with nothing to lose, or a rich person with everything to lose?
Yeah.
I asked a homeless person and they said a poor person. And I said, oh, really? I would think I would actually be more afraid of the rich person. Like, if Jeff Bezos did flip his lid, I think, oh, fuck, that's a bit scary. Yeah, it occurred to me the other day, he could probably buy all the art in the world and destroy it or just bury it.
I see what you mean with danger. Yeah. But even the power that someone like Elon Musk has, right? Yeah. Who was him and Jeff have to fight the #1 spot. But either of them can just say something on social media or on the news or something, and companies can collapse. Or what did Elon say about the diver in Thailand? You know, because he has this status and power through his money. You know, he has, like you say, the danger he can bring is pretty scary.
I'm just going to nudge Amy for a second there, because what you said, status and power, and because Amy talked about empire. So how would you like to chime in with that, with what Ash and Ben have just been saying?
Only that, I mean, that kind of gaming is just not the real world, and so you have the freedom to make mistakes in a way that you don't with, I mean, talking about social media, it may be an avatar, and then you get that blurring between yourself performing in social media and somebody who is not you. Of course, whenever you're playing as something else in a world that isn't real, you can kind of you can kind of jump between the two buildings because it's not going to matter. And when it becomes yourself, those risks become much larger. So it's
that's
I think
really
that's
interesting. Is like what you were saying is it chimed a lot with what I feel as well with improv. I do improv, and generally letting go of an identity, which is what Ash has cited with the avatar, and Amy, you've cited it with the LARP thing. You're like, I can actually go up to strangers and sing when in LARP. You can actually do that in real life. You know, you can do that on the train, right? But your fear of doing it won't let you. Whereas if you take away your identity or your supposed belief of who you are, you can. Right?
But it's the rules you adhere to, isn't it? It's like, I put this costume on so I have this power, and you're totally, because if you're an improv, like that's incredible. You become that caricature, I imagine, that character, that avatar, that whatever. And then part of LARPing, you put on a different uniform, and you choose to somehow mentally you can go, oh right, well I can do this, it's okay.
It's one of the things. There's a character in my LARP who's always encouraging people to take risks on the battlefield, and his idea is that you shouldn't get too attached to this, because if you're prepared to die in character, then you can do much more interesting things. And it's sort of interesting in terms of you talking about money and winning, because it's there's no flexibility, is there? I mean, what constitutes winning for most people, not Elon Musk, but for us, like, I know when I was a student, the idea of like having a full-time job was like the dream. There was nothing beyond that. That was paradise and like Turkish delight forever. And then your bar changes as you get older, and as you can see further and you want more. And I suppose
it's what becomes important to you, doesn't it? So I don't know if you have a family, but like suddenly as soon as you have a family, that's a different importance to you. Or you start collecting cars, like you know, whatever you think important is to you, and is always going to change. So it's a game which the rules will always be changing, and then one day you'll realize that, well, hopefully that you can get your winning without money. But, it's a scary thought.
Yeah, but I think that improv and LARP and playing with things that don't matter, you know, computer games as well, if that's it, is important, because you've got to be able to play a little bit at losing and it not matter, and trying out some things. And that's sometimes the only space you can do that in, because taking big risks in social media or with your money, a lot of people are more risk averse than they need to be, probably. But
now let's look at the word risk.
Yeah.
What we know what it used to mean. It used to mean like if you go out, you might get eaten by a wolf. And today we hear the word risk as if it's similar to that, as if the result will be, shit, I've come back, my arm's been torn off by a bear. But that's not true, is it? It doesn't actually. And this is the other thing about this game with money is our emotional connection with this, right? This means like if I was to tear it, I'm not going to, because I'm going to give it to someone outside or spend it on myself. But it does something to someone, doesn't it? We've been taught that this means more than people in some respects. It's
the emotional connection is a really interesting point as well, that like the you know, if I was gonna buy an apple off me for £5, like you would never do that. That's a total waste of money, and you just feel like I'm wasting money, and you probably feel guilty for it. If you went to overspend for something, you'd always feel very bad for it. Whereas if there's you know, here's a 20p apple, I'm giving it to you for free, you know, you kind of, there's a value to something even though it hasn't got money attached to it. But that's where the emotional value comes in, is you never want to be ripped off because you're kind of seen as stupid. If you overpay for something, I imagine it doesn't matter how rich you are, you wouldn't want to go and pay twice as much for something because you are deemed as kind of as wrong. But that's where that emotional connection comes in as well. I think you don't want to be ripped off. You don't want to lose money stupidly because it's somehow been earned. The gamblers have the huge problem, don't they? That because they haven't done much work for it, they're much more disposable to it. And that's where the addiction comes in, because it's like, oh, well, I've just won this money, I'll double it up again. Like I didn't put any effort to get it. Whereas if you had to iron 1,000 shirts to get £1, that value is so much richer to you. And this is a conversation about gaming and not value of money, but it's part of gaming, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna share that your objects, just a refresher.
Yeah, sweet.
How we got. So yeah,
Love the drawing.
So yeah, we've got Ben presented the game of money, the money game, the paper game. Amy shared a different paper game in the form of a book. And then Ash, what I just put the Twitter bird there, right? The idea of the avatar. And yeah, so what's coming up in the blend automatically is not even an answer so much as a call to action of like, just go, like, let's go. To like, I will ask your input again, but I've captured some of your remarks, and Amy said that, and that's why I put go. Just turn up and start having a go, right? As what happens when you do a live action role play. So there's 4 different words, but to LARP is we are alive, do an action, what's your role, and then play, do it. All right. So because I think that's a good answer to Ben's, like, like immediately it's quite shocking when you end with like, well, win or die. Oh my God, is that it? But to reframe it, to reframe win or die, if that's our choice, maybe we're all winning somehow, winning here, winning there, because we are not at the end yet. We are not at the die part, because no one knows what happens in the die part. To put this again in context and framing, just last week we were talking about the role that death has in creativity, right? And whether, oops, game over, don't like this, do we press play again, do we continue, do we try again? Next week we're talking about intersectional identities and things like celebrity power, and that's curious because Ben said that well, Ben and Amy and like all of you, like the idea that you have to let go of your identity or a fixed identity. And what does that mean? And then Ash, you said, why do we exist in this format? Quite an existential philosophical saying there, like, why do we exist in this format? What format is that, I wonder? And then finally, like, for me, it's like my point of the freedom to make mistakes. And I think really like as like why games and play matters for creativity is that we do live in many worlds, physical, digital, made up. It's all of it, right? It's kind of, life isn't just one type of reality, but the combination of modalities, I guess. And that's the invitation for me, is just like, we need to give each other freedom to make mistakes and make those spaces, play those spaces, defend those spaces, to keep having that flexibility of playing. But yeah, so just throwing back your own words back at you. Thoughts?
Yeah, there's what I love about the LARP thing is that rather than say, okay, well, how can we win this game? So for example, the money game, if rather than ask that, why don't we go, well, how do we not play it? Because we don't have to play it, right? It's like, it's possible to have a different achievement in life. Like Ash said, can we just be happy? Yeah, that would be a great point system. You stop comparing everyone, you stop ranking, you start to question the stories that you're told, and start to like, so I can, instead of looking at Ash as the poorest person on the screen, I can look at everyone as equals and go, it doesn't actually matter because I'm not playing the game. And in terms of LARP, it's like, well, yeah, fuck it. I mean, if the world is so fucking stupid and rubbish because we're all so many people playing this stupid game, I'm going to play this game over here. And I totally get it. This like having to step into a new environment or let go of this idea of self, because we all have an idea of self. None of you actually have any idea about me at all. But I like to think that I don't either, because it's going through constant change. Every day it's changing. That's why we shed our skin. It's the opportunity to change. I don't think of myself, Ben at 11 years old. I think that's a previous Ben. That's Muhammad Ali said, if I'm the same man at 30 as I am at 20, then I've wasted 10 years of my life. You've got to keep moving, keep changing, and that involves casting off the old self, the idea of the old self, which is often a story told to us by our parents, much like the money one. My dad was like, if you're going to buy something, you have to sell it for the same or more than what you bought it for. So you've got to keep the box nice and all that. And the amount of stress he'd put into that, it's not happiness inducing, but it does make a little bit of money. And I'm like, well, what's the point then? You realize you're on planet Earth for this short amount of time. Why hold on to these things that hurt us? Be it identity, be it a game of money, be it whatever it is, when it can just be this freedom and understanding that we can all just keep changing.
Just to bring it back, because you're saying very pertinent points. It's essentially the rules you choose to follow, right? That you choose to follow whether like as you grow up, I think you recognize this, but like, you know, does money buy me happiness? Does the status symbol make me better? You know, I'm not saying to you personally, but like, do I want money which will show this? If I have more money, I can buy a bigger house, which means my friends will like me more, or I can drive a faster car, or I can do different things, or I can go on a different holiday. But it's a rules that you choose to follow. And just to bring Amy back into it as well, like all the rules exist, you just choose whether to follow them. And then just bringing it back to kind of my point is the whole the social media currency exists. You know, what rules do you want to follow? Like, how do you want to exist as part of them? And, you know, poor house, rich house, who cares kind of thing. But this is a path I choose to follow. And like, money helps me get some of this. Doesn't mean I'm happy. You see the super rich footballers, but they come out super depressed half the time. Like, they're so rich, but it doesn't mean that, you know, you read like 100,000, they can't go out and buy a glass of milk, the things which we take for granted. And it's these kind of things which I don't think you ever kind of consider. But
yeah, rich doesn't equal good always.
Yeah. But that's what's been instilled to us, right? That money brings you happiness. And I thought it's a lovely analogy you had of Mario, how, why am I collecting 900 coins? Like, what is it? I don't go and defeat Bowser quicker or stronger or better. And it's the same with life, isn't it? It's like, why have it? It doesn't mean I'm better Mario. You don't get upgrades for it. He's not spending his money.
It's interesting how games kind of play with that, don't they? Because they often give you a space that's simplified in some way, like, you know, Mario Kart and gold coins, or any game with a money system. Suddenly you have a lot less people and a lot less money and a lot less options. And it very quickly becomes about buying whatever, you know, giving it to the person that needs it, or buying a sword or a song or something. And it really just very quickly becomes kind of silly stuff. I mean, you know, you can hoard it, but in the game, it's what you're going to use it for. That's the only thing that matters. No one really cares if you've got more of it than anyone else, if you're still level 1, you know, in a sackcloth. So it does sort of, games kind of poke fun at hoarding money, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's a huge part of that. The nasty thing about Fortnite is all these kind of boxes you kind of do and to unlock the skins and stuff like that, and that comes down to the kind of how your avatar looks and stuff like that. But you don't need to do that stuff, and you do like end up hoarding it. And like you say, it's silly stuff. It's like, I don't need to have a pink outfit or a blue cape or something like that. It makes no difference. I still play the game, so it's
cool. What other thoughts? Like thank you. Like, lots of amazing philosophical, psychological thoughts. I do like this combination that you're all putting forward, is this idea of different games, different rules, and different currency. So evolving it from the paper game to what other paper games we do play. And then from
just on Irina, is it the rules that you choose to follow? I think it's almost that a little bit more, because Ben the improv, Amy the LARP, Ash the geeky person, but we all follow different rules, and we choose the rules that we want to follow, I guess. And
yeah, and I think so. In effect, it is all made up. Right? The made up game of money, the made up game of LARP, the made up digital techniques, Fortnite, Roblox. So in many ways, the wise is the foolish in the improv, that it is improvised. Creativity is like, let's just play it. Let's just fill in the gaps. It's like the epic fantasy that is meant to be empire is the epic fantasy that is just life. The ultimate game of life, as opposed to the mechanized board game version of game of life, like the rich textures. To just like end the hour, because we ended it with Ash's like what happens next, the avatars and what Twitter could represent and platforms. Twitter as a word, obviously we now know in this context, Twitter is to use the platform, to tweet, to talk about thoughts. But the origins of Twitter comes, and that's why that's the icon, the bird. As to Twitter is a condition of tremulous excitement. I thought this one. That is like the twittering is the condition of tremulous excitement, because that is the description for how different birds sound, right? Different, and so I just remember references that the biblical passage, regardless of your affiliation for faith or not, but the notion that there was once a passage that says, "Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet they are provided for." And are we, as humans, not of more value than they, or maybe equal value? And which one of us, by worrying, could add 1 cubit to our stature? So just like so I like this idea of that we've been playing this made-up game of money, and yet we also simulate avatars in other games that offer wisdoms. So to that end, we'll continue to be continued at another installment phase of this live game. For now, we are going to end this episode, and that's the call to action, really. Like, where will you go? You, us as players, what rules will we make? And at the empty spaces that we explore, I guess. So any final last words, or not even last words, for now? Anything else from you, Ash, Amy, and Ben? Otherwise, yes.
Thank you for having us.
Continue. Thanks for
Awesome.
joining. And that's a wrap. So game on, play on, and make the world a better place, please. For purpose. Okay. Bye for now.